In today's video, I'm going to show you how to take a hosta and turn it into many hostas many times over. You can take these beautiful plants and grow them in pots into a sellable nursery product. And I'm not talking about just taking a large hosta and dividing it into 2 or 3 clumps. I'm talking about taking hostas and dividing them into many plants that can be repotted and sold in your backyard nursery. Let's get to it. If this is your first time visiting my channel, good to see you. If it's not your first time, good to see you again. Today we're going to take one of the plants on my best-selling must-have plants to start your nursery with, and I'm going to show you how to turn these into a lot of plants for free. And this is a big step in you becoming an actual grower and nursery owner. You got to learn how to propagate and you got to learn how to grow your own plants. Why is that? So you don't have any money or very limited money actually in the plants that you're growing and ultimately going to sell. Now today I'm going to be dividing a variety of hosta called Vulcan. And as you can see, Vulcan is just an amazing variety of hosta, variegated variety. It grows to be a pretty large size and it's a great seller, does great in pots. And the reason that I have chosen this particular plant, and when I say plant, I mean, why did I grab this pot instead of that pot? I grabbed this one because when I look inside of it, I see a number of stems coming up. I'd say 4 or 5 or more stems in here. Now that doesn't mean that I can divide this into exactly that number of hostas, but chances are when I dig this out of this pot, I'm going to be able to make several hostas, say at least 3, maybe 4 or more out of this one plant. So that's the reason I've chosen this one instead of a different one. Now the first thing that I'm going to do with this hosta is just pop it out of its pot, get its label out of the way, and just pop it out of here and just have a look at it. And there's quite a few roots there, and I just keep my wheelbarrow here of potting soil, and I'll just kind of shake out as much of that loose dirt as I can. These were just potted just last season. I bought these from a local wholesale nursery as small starts, and you can see how much in just one season these have grown, and I'll give you a look at that. You can generally see what's left here. You have a root ball, little potting soil in it, and you can see the stems there. You can just see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there are 6 or 7 stems here. I can't tell exactly, but I'm going to wash the rest of this potting soil off of here simply in a bucket of water to get this nice and clean. Now before I wash the soil off of these roots, understand that the way that I do propagation of hostas is for nursery production. This is not me trying to divide hostas to place in my yard or divide my own plants in my own yard for my own use. If I were doing that, there are better ways to do that are a lot less trouble. So for example, if you had a big hosta growing in your yard that was 3 or 5 or 10 times this size, a huge clump, you can just dig that up with a shovel and just whack it in half or in fourths and have 3 or 4 or 5 nice big clumps of hostas that you can just take and just stick right back in the ground and spread those out in your yard or share them with your neighbors or friends all you want to. But that is not what we are doing here as backyard growers. We are growing our own plants, and it would take so much space to do hostas the way that people typically divide them in their own yards. It would take you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of giant hostas, and it would take up your entire property and your entire nursery just to keep that alive and moving. So the way that I do this, again, this is just the way that I do it, is I divide these into very small clumps and then grow them out for a season or 2 in order to create a sellable plant in a reasonable amount of time without taking up so much space. Because for most backyard growers, one of the primary things that we have to figure out is how to best use the space that we have. I'm gonna take this plant and just kind of swish it around in the water by its roots. I'm not going to make any attempt at all to be careful with it. Hostas are incredibly tough. You can disturb their roots a great deal at just virtually any time of the year. And what I'm doing is washing all of that loose potting soil out of that plant. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can see what I'm doing. is so I can see down tight into the root ball exactly what it is that I'm doing. Now that's getting pretty clean. I want to take a little more water and wash that out just as much as I can. You know, this is a hard thing to do on a really cold day, so I try to do this in the spring or in the summer, really anytime the weather is even a little bit warm. This is just not that difficult of a thing to do. A plant that's bigger with more extensive roots that may be more tightly root bound is a little harder to work with, but you can work with those as well. You can also work with plants that are a lot smaller than this one. This is just an example that I am going to show you today. Now, this is pretty clean. It's got a little bit of loose dirt on it, but what I'm really looking for here inside is places where I can begin to take a sharp blade, a knife, a razor, something like that, and cut these to begin separating them into more plants. Now I'm going to take a pocket knife, which is what I'm using. You can use any sharp blade, and begin looking towards the middle of the plant or wherever you think there's a good spot, and just cut right through that crown. That's called this part of the hosta here is called the crown or the rhizome, where the individual plants arise from. And there you can see I have cut that. And now we just kind of shake these out. Sometimes it's good to go back to your bucket of water with both of these and kind of work them apart. Again, no real need to be gentle with hosta roots. You really can't do this with most plants. Don't ever try to do this with a flowering shrub of any kind, or an evergreen certainly, but you can do this with hostas. They are well known for their ability to be separated. So now in my hands I think I have 3 stems there and 3 or 4 stems there. So let's see if I can cut out another one from this one. Just take your knife. You want to try to make sure you get part of the crown, part of the rhizome, and some roots below it as you cut. Let's see. I may have cut into one of the stems in the back, and that's okay if you do that. You're not going to get every single one of them. But there is a plant that will be a $6 plant next season. So I'll take this and pot it and grow it out for a plant next season. So there's one. Let's see. Mike can get another division out of this. Just cut right through that crown. And there you go. Kind of cut part of that off there. Now I may have injured that one a little bit there, but it's always worth a try. Let's see if I cut it. Anyway, it may survive and it may not, but I'm going to plant that. Look, these don't take much root material at all to survive, so that's probably going to be just fine. And there's the third plant from that half of the division. That one will be totally good next season, and very, very simple to do. We'll take the rest of this hosta and let's see what we can get here. This has 1, 2, 3. This has 5 potential places to divide this. I'm not going to be able to get 5 out of it. They just don't work that way, but I can get, let's see, there's 2 there. If I'm careful and if I cut this right, I should be able to get 2 more from this one, but let's see if I can get some roots on both of these with a cut right there. There you go. Nothing to it, really. There's a little hosta plant, and there's a little hosta plant. So you got a big chunk of roots coming off of this side. You got a piece of the rhizome or the crown here. And you got a nice little plant there. Okay, let's see how many more we can get. We're kind of running out of root material here, but I think we can get 2 more out of this anyway. Let's see. All right. Now, this one will be a survivor for next year's crop. And let's see, I'm just going to take a knife and cut this little guy off of here because there's no, well, you know what? I'm going to just save that whole thing. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but there's a lot of little beginner roots starting out right in there. And you can see some root material here on the back side. I'm just going to save this whole thing, even though it has 2 stems. There's no way I'll get 2 plants out of that. So that's pretty good. Let's see. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 plants that we have gotten from one hosta for next year's crop of plants. What will ultimately wind up going into a pot, I'll take one of these small plants that I've just divided and I'll cut the top out of it. And I know that that looks like hosta murder, but these things will thrive just fine in their pots, just like this. I'll take a pot, grab a little potting soil right here from a wheelbarrow, put a little in there. So didn't take that much at all, and stuff all of those roots in there. That's really more roots than need to go in that pot, but for right now they'll be fine. That's the reason that you use small pots like this for just a growing season when you're growing out small plants, is to save space. If you put these in a regular sized pot right now, they'll do just fine, but they will take up a whole lot of room all summer long when you can be using that space for something else. And you just take it over here and snap it into a pot. We'll do the rest with the rest of these, put them in the shade, and that's it. And as always, you have to include the tag. You have to know what kind of plants you have at all times, no matter what the plant, no matter what you're working with, you got to know what kind of plants you have. That's basically it for dividing these hostas. Let me show you one last thing. If we could fast forward in time 1 year, this is what we would have. The process that you just watched me go through, I did with these last year, and this is what I have now. I have a tray of 18 of these. I have many trays of these. This is just an example. But these will be ready to sell next year, and some of these will be ready to divide next year. You always sell some and you keep some to make more divisions from. So even if those hostas that I just divided on camera, even if 2 or 3 or 4 of those don't make it, we still have 3 or 4 or 5 free plants that we have propagated ourselves, and after a season or maybe 2 seasons of growth, they'll be ready to sell at retail for $6. And once you start this process, once you do it for a year, then 2 years, then 3 years, then you always have another crop coming along that'll be ready to divide and ready to propagate to grow your next year's crop of hostas. The final step on these little beauties is to give them a really good soaking to settle all that potting soil down in there, and then place them in a shady location where they're safe from the burning sun. And these will simply sit here, keeping them moist every once in a while. They'll just sit here until next spring. Pretty easy, but pretty effective. So we divided all the Vulcan hostas that we had. That was the same thing I showed you just a minute ago. And out of 5 hostas, we have a total now of 31. And, you know, 2 or 3 of them may die, and that's fine. But the point is, this is the magic of plant multiplication. And if you're going to be a backyard grower, you got to learn how to do this. If you find this kind of material helpful, I hope you'll like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you again on my next video. This is Savvy Dirt Farmer signing off. I hope all of you watching have a great day today.